So very happy to introduce myself and hand over to Alexandra. As you know, we both are from Leapwork. I'm the partner manager for the region, for the Benelux region, and for the DACH region at Leapwork. And yeah, I'm working with Brightest, and so we're very happy to have that invitation for the academy here. And thank you for getting us that stage here. So I'm looking forward to a lot of good conversations that we might have afterwards with you as well. So I encourage you to ask a lot of questions if you have, and to get back to us. So we'll be happy to hopefully answer all of your questions. But I'll hand over to Alexandra, who will guide you through the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ralph. Hi, everyone. It's good to meet you all. So I'm Alex 𝐶𝐞𝐬. I work alongside Ralph here at Leapwork and our channel team, and I lead our pre-sales team for the channel. I've been with Leapwork just close to 3 years now, which does feel like a lot longer because we've been growing so quickly. And really my main role is making sure that our partners are successful with Leapwork once they do partner with us. And the second part of my role is really working with strategic partners such as Microsoft. So some of the technical alliances, which I'll speak a little bit about once we go through the demo and through the introduction. So the time that I'll be spending today is going to be split into 2 different parts. In the first part, I just want to do a quick 5-minute intro to Leapwork. We're not going to do a lot of slides. It's just going to be about four slides just to kind of level set everyone. And then we're going to jump into a live product demo so that you can actually see the product, and hopefully that will raise a lot of questions. Happy to have follow-up conversations post this as well. So awesome. So I think we can get started. Great. So as I mentioned, I want to do a quick level set and introduction on who Leapwork is, our kind of stance in the market from a product perspective, and then we'll jump into the demo. So as an introduction, Leapwork is a Danish funded company. We started in 2015, started by Christian Brink and Klaus, both CEO and CTO. We are a Series B funded company with investors such as KKR, which is a huge VC firm from the States. Salesforce Ventures invested in our Series B round, DN Capital and Headline. And you know, through the years, so through the last 5 to 7 years, we've had great success in the market. We have over 400 active customers across all sectors and geographies. All very happy customers because we have around 150% plus retention rate. So all of our happy customers always come back and expand their usage with Leapwork, which just kind of goes to show the value that they get from the product. And we're around over 400 employees across 10 different countries, which has been insane growth. I think we're about 100 when I joined, so we've grown a lot over the last couple of years. In terms of, you know, some of our customers, you can take, of course, our word, but our customers kind of speak for themselves. We have some of the largest companies using Leapwork for automation of some of their key business applications and tier 1 applications that they use internally. So the likes of Amazon, Google, I'm sure you recognize some of these, even NASA, which is a great logo to have there. But amongst these, as technology companies, we do work with a lot of financial services, a lot of retailers, and pretty much I think in every single industry we do have some customers. So QA is a central part of any business. So we're not kind of pigeonholing ourselves into just one industry, which I think is important. Just to touch on this, I know that Brightest is focused on multiple different types of technologies, but earlier on this year, Leapwork has been selected as Microsoft Strategic Partners, a partner for test automation in general, for D365 and for Power Platform. And what they were really looking to do is find a solution to help their customers accelerate their automation journey and essentially get their implementations out faster, and really drive value within those customers. Now, one of the reasons why they chose us is because we are able to automate across the entire technical stack. So we're not a point solution just for D365, but we can execute end-to-end testing. So if you have customers that have SAP environments, Salesforce, Oracle, mainframes, legacy-based systems, mobile apps, anything that will run a business essentially from an application standpoint, we can automate. And when Microsoft was looking for a strategic partner, they wanted a partner that could do this because, as you know, a business application is the core of a business and it's connected to X amount of systems and third-party applications. So a platform that would enable customers to effectively test across the board was crucial, and it is crucial within a business context. So that was one of the reasons. But really for Leapwork and kind of where we stand from a differentiated perspective is that all of these companies have technology, right? We've got applications, we've got more releases coming out, and with that comes testing. And about, I'd say about 85% of testing today is still done manually based on Capgemini's report. And what we found is that about 8 out of 10 testers are not coders. So really Leapwork's kind of existence came from that need of building a visual approach to automation that everybody can understand without the requirement for code or to be a full-blown developer or highly skilled technical resource. So we've got customers that are using Leapwork, in hospitals with nurses building automation all the way to super high technical teams in the likes of AWS and Google. So it is a language that everybody can understand, and you'll be able to see this as part of the demo and kind of our differentiator where we sit in the market. We've got proven track record with over 400 customers. We've got a quick ROI and a really low total cost of ownership, which is, as I'm sure you're familiar with, is kind of, when you implement automation within a business, it's not just about the cost of that tool, but it's also the cost of owning it and what does it take to ramp and build as you expand. So ramp up stage, we've got about less than 40 days based on all of our customers so far, an average of 5x ROI in the first 12 months of implementing something like Leapwork, and a decrease in around 90% of the time that's spent on manual testing after Leapwork. So let's talk a little bit about the product, and we'll get into the demo in just a second. But as I mentioned, Leapwork is a visual platform. It is a visual approach to automation that will allow anybody to build automation. And even just by looking at this screen here, this is what we would call a flow, an automation flow, or a test case. And even just by looking at this, you can already tell what we're looking to do. So we're starting off D365 or any application. We're getting some sales orders from some data. We're creating sales order, and then we're validating it, passing it or fail. So even if you've never seen Leapwork before, you can already kind of tell what we're looking to achieve here. And that's really the concept of Leapwork. And as I mentioned, today we're going to cover a D365 demo, but Leapwork works across the full software stack, which I mentioned. And I think this is really key because if you have customers that have complex environments, it really matters that you're not just using a point solution from one problem, but you have something that can cater to everything, which I think is key. So let's jump into our demonstration so that you can see the product in action. Any questions so far? Anything that we want to ask?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Awesome. No problem. Great. So let's kick it off. So I've just opened up my Leapwork Studio here, and this is what is used to build automation. And any person that is building automation with Leapwork would have access. It's essentially the UI of Leapwork. A couple of things that I just want to point out before we begin. So we're going to break down the demo into 3 different parts. In the first part, I'll walk you through how to create a test case with Leapwork and how easy it is. We're then going to talk a little bit about how to scale test cases with some external data. to be able to cover multiple use cases with the same test case. We'll also talk about maintenance, which is one of the biggest burdens with automation in general, because you have applications that change so frequently, we need to be able to keep up with those changes. And then thirdly, we're going to run a test live so that we can see the results and do some troubleshooting live. So hopefully this gives a good introduction into the product, but again, really more than happy to do follow-up sessions and dig a little bit deeper for anyone that's interested. So a couple of things to point out. We've got our studio. Here on the left, we have an asset tree. And the asset tree is where we build our entire test suite. So if I'm looking to build a test suite for D365 for a customer or for SAP or for Salesforce or maybe a custom application, I structured it in a way that I have all of my end-to-end flows, I have all of my modules within that application, then I create the flow for each one. On the right-hand side, you'll notice this large canvas area. This is where we build automation with that visual approach that I spoke about. And as I mentioned, we have a this unique way of building our flows. And this is the flow that we're going to be creating today. We're going to log into finance and operations. We're going to go to bank management. We're going to go to our statements, and then we're going to create some statements and pass the test. So again, a simple example to give you some flavor of the tool. Now, as I mentioned, even just by looking at this, it is intuitive. You can already understand a couple of pointers. We have some green connectors here at the top that just signal the system that the previous step is executed successfully. It should move on to the next step. And then we have some blue connectors which allow you to pass in data from one building block into another or from one application into another application. So you might be wondering, how do we actually get to this stage? So we're going to take a step back and we're going to create a flow from scratch. And you have a couple of different ways of doing this. You can expand your connector out and you'll get a list of all of the different types of building blocks that you can use within your test. Now, all of these are for different types of applications, as I mentioned, that full stack support. So if you have a desktop-based application for a customer, mobile, web, and web would cover anything that runs within a browser, whether that's a third-party application or whether that's something that's built in-house. Maybe it's an e-commerce front end for a retailer. Maybe it's a customized Salesforce environment. Whatever the case might be, we support everything that runs within web. Mobile, we've got SAP, we've got green screen, we've got Electron, so there's wide support there, in addition to other options that we can add in our test to make it more effective, like logic, like data, etc. So to add in a building block, I can type and look for the first step within my test. In this case, I want to start a web browser. I want to choose the browser that I'm going to use, and then I'm going to type in my URL. I'm going to just quickly grab my username. And the second way that you can build a test case is through our recorder capability. So the ability to walk through a test case with the recorder, and Leapwork will automatically create it for you. So any user can just get started right away. They know the business process. They know what the test case should do. So they can start off the recorder, and we're now in record mode. When we hover over the application, you'll notice that Leapwork recognizes all of these elements individually and allows me to interact with those elements easily. So if I want to highlight an input field as part of my test case, I get a prompt of the types of actions I can take for that field. Again, this is in kind of plain English. There's no code. It is 100% no code. So for the username, I want to be able to type some web text. So I'm going to type in my username, I'm going to apply it. Leapwork will go ahead and do that for me. And then I can move on into my next step. And at this point in time, it's going to prompt me, of course, to type in the password, which I will, again, copy because it changes so frequently. I doubt that I'll be able to remember it fully. So I'll do the same for my password with a type web text building block. Leapwork will go ahead, type it in, but also record it in the background to make sure that I can reuse this. And any steps that I record or any process that I record, Leapwork will then save it. I can also save it as a process and reuse it at a later stage. So now I'm creating the login, but if I have 1,000 test cases for the system for a customer, I can save the process that I've just recorded and reuse it at a later stage, which is key. And I'll go through that when we We go back into Leapwork. Now we're in our F&O environment, but this could be absolutely any application I'm looking to automate. And for this particular example, I want to be able to go to my bank management section, and I'm going to use a ClickUp element action here. So basically just describing what I am doing. I'm going to go to my all bank statements, do the same, and then we're going to create a brand new statement from scratch. And I'm going to add in 2 fields. I'm not going to make you watch me adding, 20 fields. So we're going to keep it simple just for this example. But we're going to open it up. And what you'll notice is that we have a bunch of fields. We have some, date pickers. So anything that a user can do on an application, Leapwork can mimic. So I think that's important in terms of kind of limitations, because I know there might be questions of, is there anything that we can or cannot do? But the idea is if a user can do it, Leapwork can mimic it. So I'm going to type in my bank name for my bank statement. I'm going to put in a net amount. And these are placeholder data. I will tie some other data in once I save the test. But for now, it's some placeholder data that I'll have there. And the last thing I want to do is I want to be able to save this. And click. So I've saved my statement. At this point in time, I can do a couple of things. I can continue on and open up another application, continue my test as I'm going through it. So if I need to maybe open up another maybe Salesforce environment that's tied to this or something that's unique, I can go ahead and continue creating that test across the different technology. But for this example, I'm going to save it as it is. And you'll notice when we're back in Leapwork, we now have some building blocks based on the actions that I have taken. And now I can start to optimize this test. So things to look at is, how do I use some data? How do I save some of these components so that I can reuse them at a later stage to make creation of tests more efficient? So once I have my base, I can start to build upon that base really easily. So when we're back, let's assume that, I've got a statement that I'm creating here, of course, as part of my test, and I want to create a number of statements with the same test. So instead of having to duplicate my test cases and, add in my separate data, I want to use some external data to drive in values instead of using the ones that I've entered in during the test. Use cases for this could be using permutations, so testing that different types of data works within that test. And to do that, I want to make some space within the flow that I've created. Now, Leapwork allows for this. So once you create a test, you can make changes to it really, really easily. You don't have to re-record anything. You can just add in your options, your optimizations, any sort of functions that you might need. And for this one, I want to add in data from a spreadsheet. You can also add data from a database if you choose to do that. And the reason why I'm adding it here is because I want to have it loaded and ready before I create that statement. So to do that, I want to be able to import my file, and I have a finance and operations file here where I have a list of statements, a list of banks and amounts for my statements that I want to create. Got 14 different rows. I could have hundreds, really just depending on the use case. And I select the columns that I want to use as part of this test. So what you'll notice now, I have bank and amount connector here on the right. And what Leapwork will allow me to do is take that data and drive it into the building block of where this data should sit. So we've got the bank, we've got the amount, but if I have 10, 15 different fields, all of my data can live centrally within that read Excel file that I can manage and update from one place instead of having to maintain the entire test case. Now, what Leapwork will do is it's going to load the data. It's going to click on New, enter the data, save it for the first row. But with the click of a button, I can click on Iterate, and Leapwork will automatically create an iteration around this point, which will mean that it will create a statement for each row of data within that sheet, which one will be able to allow those test cases to be tested with different combinations of data, permutations, or if I need to execute a batch of orders for tests, Leapwork will allow me to do that really, really easily with the click of a button. Now, once we have done this, so we've added in our data, we're going to use variables as we're going through the test. Another thing to keep in mind is reusability, right? A lot of testing is repetition. It's going through the same steps every single time. And so, as I mentioned while we were recording, the ability to record something once and reuse it at a later stage becomes really, really powerful when we're talking about efficiency and speeding up time to creation of tests. But also when we're building an automation strategy, having a defined approach to how we build automation and a standard. So let's assume I've got 200 test cases for D365 that I'm building for a customer. And 40 of those test cases will require me to create a statement. Let's say it's a new feature, it's a new addition or configuration to the system. And I know that I'm going to have to do this 40 different times in different test cases. So I can select those building blocks. I can go ahead and I can create what we call a subflow. And I'm going to call it create statement. And I'll call it brightest and save it. And what you'll notice is that Leapwork has now taken those building blocks and created one building block. And this has three main benefits. So let's talk a little bit about that. First, from a visual perspective, of course, it tidies up the flow. It makes it look neater, easier to manage. The second thing is now that one statement or that one subflow is in our subflow section here in the building blocks. So if, for example, I'm looking for the one that I've just created, I can filter through and I could add it to any other flow I'm creating. So those 40 flows that I need a statement created for becomes a lot easier. I don't have to re-record those steps. I can just plug in my data as needed for those tests. So it becomes easier to use. Now, the second benefit is when we're talking about a best practice approach from an operational perspective, if I have my suite of tests here on the left, I have all of my end-to-end flows. You know, I've got all of those 200 flows, and then I have common subflows. So these are this is essentially a library of these subflows that I'm building as I am expanding my my automation framework for that particular application. And what actually happens is when you have this common subflow library built, when you're creating a test from scratch, all you have to do is drag and drop. So if I need to log into Dynamics 365 F&O, I need to enter in my credentials. Again, data could just be entered in. I can validate my logged in user. Let's say that I want to search some data. You can just drag and drop these modules because they've already been created and saved. They're generic, meaning that you can also use them across with different data. You can customize them as needed. Now what I've done is in the space of 10 seconds, created a brand new flow from scratch. So it saves a lot of time from a building perspective when you're building that automation, which I think is super important. Now, we spoke a little bit about at the beginning of applications rapidly changing and them being, you know, companies are more agile and there's a lot of more, you know, pushed releases. And we've got configurations and we need to keep up with the demands of our customers. But what actually happens when you are changing your application? You also need to maintain your QA tests and your regression tests that you're running, for example. So let's assume those 200 tests I mentioned, we had 40 that were using this create statement process. Let's say that, you know, our customer requires a change for the create statement process. And now I've got 40 different tests that I've got to go back and change. Well, if you're making use of these subflows, it actually allows you to make the change once and it deploys across the board. So if I go in here, and let's just say that part of my create statement changes and I need to add in a new step. Let's say it's a validate step or it's a new field. It's an additional process. I can go ahead and record it as part of that, save it, add it to that subflow, save it, and all of those 40 cases or test cases have now been updated with the click of a button. So I've saved a lot of time on the maintenance aspect of having to go to each test case, or if it's a coding approach, to having to go and maintain now 40 different test cases with code. and you're having to rely on, obviously highly technical skill resources to do that. So as a summary of what we've covered so far is we've gone through recording a flow and how to create it, scaling out the flow using some external data, using these reusable components to build an operational best practice and speed up the time that it takes to build tests, but also maintain them in the long run. And lastly, last but not least, of course, what I want to be able to do is I'm going to run a flow for you live so that you can see Leapwork in action, and we'll take a look at the results. So I'm going to run the one that I had finished here. The only additional added building block is a pass building block. So if we're able to create a statement successfully, we're going to pass the test. What you'll notice is I have another subflow here, which is for a login. So when you're building your test cases in the best way possible, you'll have them really made up of these components. So I'm going to run it locally here. You will notice Leapwork running in real time, and this is locally on my machine. In a normal setup, of course, you would have Leapwork running remotely, you would schedule it, you can trigger it from pipelines, and you can integrate it into a larger framework of maybe Jenkins or Azure DevOps pipelines. But as of now, just for this example, for the demo, of course, I just want you to be able to see it live, going through this entire process. Once we're going through the test running, Leapwork actually records the entire screen so that you can play back and you have a timeline of that test running, and it'll allow you to troubleshoot faster. So now we're adding in our statement, we're saving it, we're going to execute the first row, and then we're going to pass the test. So when we're back in our Leapwork studio, what you'll notice is that now we're able to see that test play back with a video capture of that test running in real time. So you'll see it on the screen there. You also have a detailed message log of all of the events that took place during that run. And of course, you'll see the flow here at the top. The great thing about this is that it is a timeline. So if I want to go forward and backwards to see where the test has failed, troubleshoot, I can easily do that. For this particular example, we passed the test. We were able to create that statement successfully. But let's assume that at some point, the test had failed. Maybe an element was changed, maybe it was not found, maybe it was found but not clickable, maybe the application's having issues and I'm getting a false negative. I can see it on the screen, so I can click on the message at that point in time. So I can go to bank management. Leapwork will highlight the building block in question that message is tied to. It'll also show it to me on the screen here, so I can see the element highlighted, that it is the bank management one. So if that's causing issues, it helps me do root cause analysis really, really quickly. And Leapwork also integrates with the likes of Jira or Azure DevOps to be able to log defects and bugs based on failed tests, along with the video, along with the log file, to be able to give teams an insight into how the QA testing is going. So in summary of what we've gone through so far is we've gone through the recording of a test case, scaling it out with data, creating those reusable components to save time, and finally running a flow and going through how Leapwork would help you troubleshoot issues faster. I'm hoping this gave a good introduction into Leapwork. I know that we are coming up on time, but I'd love to hear if there are any questions or thoughts or feedback on the team. That would be great.
Thank you so much, Alex. Are there any questions from the audience? Frederick, yes.
Yeah, thank you first for the demo. I was wondering, how does the recognition of the object is happening? Because I see that it seems like screenshots, or is it really working with the properties in the backend?
Great question. So the way Leapwork recognizes, I'll go into a second, but what you see here is just a representation of that element. So it kind of takes a little snapshot of what it looks like to just help you identify when you're building the test case. But what it actually does behind the scenes is that it looks at the DOM structure of that element. So whilst Leapwork is a no-code tool, there's a lot of complexity under the hood because there's a lot of complexity to make it no-code and make it easy to use. So what it actually does is it looks at the DOM structure. and it picks the best possible path for that element based on attributes. So here you'll notice there's a strategy list. These are all different strategies. These are all different paths to get to the same bank management button. And what Leapwork will do is it will choose the most generic one here at the top that is the most stable. And that is built into the tool. And that's really what makes Leapwork very different than some of the other approaches on the market. If we're looking, for XPath values or tools that pick up dynamic IDs, Leapwork has actually been built to ignore those dynamic IDs and to look for generic attributes that will point to that element. Is that something maybe that you've had challenges with in the past? Is that kind of where the question's coming from?
Well, I was just wondering because I saw the snapshots and I thought that you might be using the image as itself to recognize it on the application under test. Because yeah, for web, I understand that you are using the properties.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for example, when you are automating SAP, I mean, then the or other desktop applications or even the mainframe, does it also work with properties in the background or does it then work with screenshots?
So great question. In terms of desktop-based applications that run on Windows, we use native object inspection. So we actually look at the code structure for objects when we pick them up. So we're still looking at the properties. For the SAP stuff, we are hooking into the SAP scripting engine. And let me just show you an example of what we pick up. For SAP, we pick up the target for that element. So as an example, let's look at here. So this is an example of us going from SAP into a Salesforce environment, so having a full end-to-end test. So within our SAP building block, you'll notice there's a target for the element that we're picking up. There's an SAP element type, and then there's a target. Now, for remote desktops, for example, like Citrix and anything else, typically, obviously, if we don't have anything installed on the environment, there's no way to automate it, but we do have image and OCR capability. So if that's a need and a requirement, it is there for edge use cases. And for mainframe, it does use image and text recognition, but we do have a recorder for the different kind of display types and recognition types for different mainframe emulators. So we support, Rumba, the likes of the common ones that we see in the market.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks. There's another question from Arno. Is it possible to execute queries and use the data that was returned from the query later in the test case?
Sure. So is that the question around a database query?
Arno?
I'm assuming yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So what you'll notice is that in the building block section here, there is a database building block where you set up an ODBC connection to the database you're using. You select or type out your query, you refresh it, it queries the database, and then what you will get here is you will get a list of all of the data within your query, like the read Excel, that you can then use within your test. So yes.
Great. Another question from Carol. Is it possible to add a subflow into another subflow?
Yes, absolutely. So you can nest subflows. So if you have a larger business process that you've saved, made up of different components, yes, you can absolutely use subflows within a subflow. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions in the audience? Patrick, yes.
Yes, you mentioned that it's Leapwork is a no coding tool, but does it also mean that when you have a complex situation where maybe the out of the box solutions of Leapwork are not an answer, is it possible to write a script that does something for you?
Absolutely. So you know, with Leapwork being a completely visual approach, we do understand that a lot of customers have complex environments, and we can cater to, I would say, 95% of those. The reason why I say that is we do have a lot of options to add in, like generators and debugging and logic, and, you know, you can even add for loops and switch statements if you want to get a little bit more complex. It is there. But if it must be that you want to use code, you do have the ability to write C# code blocks. You can run JavaScript. You can also run a PowerShell script as part of a flow. You can run the command line if you want to run a Python script, for example. So yes, absolutely, that is an option. We don't want to take it completely away from users. We do have some really high technical users that still want to use something. But it is there in the case that it is needed. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not for common use, of course, but
yes,
I am always a little bit afraid when for low and no coding tools that when you are blocked and the out-of-the-box solutions are not providing an answer, that there still is some kind of a fail-safe where you might find a solution, and then, yeah, mostly scripting might give you that solution. So it's good to know that this is possible, and even with all the different languages that you summed up. So nice.
awesome.
I also saw that Carol asked another sub-question, the subflows. And can you also have an overview of all the tests where a specific subflow is used?
So great question. At the moment, it's really dependent on the structure that you set up. So if I'm building a specific application suite of tests, I would have, you know, a folder structure, and there's best practices that we typically would instruct or advise our customers or partners to use. So you would have your common subflows, and then, you know, you would have your, for example, here I've got a D365 more complex test flow where I have subflows part of that. There is currently no way to see what subflows is part of, you know, which test. It is something that our product team is looking at potentially for the future, to be able to kind of aggregate, okay, we've got 500 different test cases using one subflow. This has changed. We may need to take a look at maintaining it as an example. But at the moment, there is no way that you can view that.
Okay, thanks.